Witam kochanych ludzi, which I think is hello lovelies in Polish, roughly. Today we're going to take a look at Baptism of Fire by the RPG Pundit and published by Mad Scribe. So, a little bit of disclosure. I used to be on a podcast with Pundit. I stopped being on a podcast with Pundit during COVID. People associate me with him still for whatever reason other than we're both game designers. I've also written stuff for Mad Scribe myself. I got this for free. So if you think that's going to have altered my opinion in whatever way or the other, then, you know, you're aware, at least. Okay, so what is this weighty tome? Baptism of Fire is a medieval authentic set of role-playing rules and setting for a historical game world set in 11th century Poland. So it's kind of necessitates explaining what the hell medieval authentic actually means. And, well, okay. It's not quite absolutely historical one for one, because that would be fairly boring. Rather, it tries to present the world as it was in history in fairly broad strokes, so like you don't have to study for a couple of years before you can play. But also brings in supernatural or magical elements in a low-key way, in the way that people believed that they were acting upon their world during that time period. So it is a grittier, slightly more realistic end of the OSR, and it strives for some medieval verisimilitude and so on, but does include some fantasy elements, but they are going to be rare or difficult, whichever way you want to look at it. That's how it's going to be. So this is an OSR style game at the more hardcore gritty end of what constitutes the OSR. So like Lamentations with less murder dungeons but slightly harsher rules, in a way. Character advancement is a mix, if you want it to be, of random or selective character advancement. So you can either have two roles, or when you level up, or you can choose one of the options when you level up. In addition to that, each character class does get their own little bonuses as they stack up. So, kind of bringing some of the ideas of semi-random character leveling, which in a way is more like real life, I suppose, in some fashions. But some people are against it, in which case you can just choose to select. Taking here, for example, the Archer class. So hit points 1d8 modified by Constitution at level 1, plus 1 per level thereafter. But when you level up, you can either choose to have another 1d8 hit points modified by Con added on, or you can roll twice and you might get that, you might get something else, but you get two things. So it's hedging your bets, a bit like when you choose in various versions of D&D whether to take the average roll on the hit point dice or to take a random roll. I sway between liking this and not liking this. I've got a similar system and some stuff I'm working on where you get multiple rolls depending how much experience you've accumulated, but you only get to keep one of those rolls. So it's semi-random to represent you may not necessarily know what you're going to learn to do through your experiences. And so I'm not against it. I'm not entirely for it. And this mixed approach is interesting and can appeal to both sides. And, you know, at your table, you can say, no, you select one, or no, you have to roll twice, or even roll 3 times and pick 2, or whatever it is you wanted to do. So that's fine, as far as I'm concerned. Yeah, it's a low magic game, and to use magic or holy powers, it's a bit of a rigmarole to do anything with. It's probably better used during downtime than anything else to prepare stuff like holy water and so on. But because the magic is so low, whatever small magics you can get your hands on for any sort of edge becomes massively higher valued. Emphasis is also placed during character creation on your social standing, your class. So that sense of place, geographically and in society, is very important. That said, you know, there are magical classes. If you want to play a witcher, essentially, you can be a witch hunter. The main magical class is unpronounceable. Skomrosny, perhaps. They're technically sort of bards, roustabouts, actors, harlequins, and so on, but they're like a proper magical class in this. Maybe they left the title in Polish to put people off playing bards, which I can certainly approve of. So that's something. And similarly, you've got several holy classes, but it's possible for other classes to pick up a little bit of folk magic and so on as they go along as well. But if you want to play a magical class, then really the bard or the witch hunter is probably the way you want to go with that. The artwork throughout is a mix of artificially intelligence produced art and historical art, and the AI art is produced by putting the historical art through Midjourney and then asking it to create works based on those historical works. Now, needless to say, this is quite controversial in some quarters. My position is ever evolving, but we should probably briefly talk about it because people have been massively kicking up a stink. So the cover is probably the main thing that is obviously present and AI produced, but I wish they'd tell me how they get Midjourney to produce people actually holding swords properly, and proper swords for that matter. But there are other pieces scattered throughout, as well as the historical pieces by various artists, and other bits of layout here and there, produced either by artists or AI. Now, these are all artists who are long dead, right? Who aren't missing out by having their work pushed through an AI in any way. I think that's a somewhat dubious claim at the best of times when it comes to training AI, because human artists do that. But nonetheless, that may alleviate some people's concerns. For the most part, it's not really jarring. It all seems mostly fitting. A few bits do look slightly odd or out of place, but then they're the ones that contain, generally speaking, the more magical and mystical elements, which are supposed to look slightly out of place and jarring. So I do think it works. How you feel about it is up to you. And while we're talking about controversies relating to this project, it's by the RPG Pundit, who has an abrasive heel personality online, gets in lots of fights with people over politics and just about anything else you care to mention, and is utterly hated in some quarters. I disagree with him on tons of his politics, but frankly, unless you're highly attuned to what you assume are going to be dog whistles, you're not going to get much sense of that from this. It doesn't infect his games, shall we say. There is no diatribe present in this book telling you who can and can't play his games. There's no assumption, particularly that one way or the other is right or good. It's just representing what happened in history. If you just read it flat with no assumptions, I don't think you'll find any particular bias in the text worth speaking of. Now, as well, the game is set in Poland. Weirdly, Poland has become somewhat controversial. Its existence, its national politics, its national culture. Poland has quite a lot of anti-immigrant sentiment, anti-Muslim sentiment, anti-Russian sentiment, even though it is part of the EU. Anti-abortion sentiment. It's very Catholic as a kind of reaction to the Soviet years, which puts it out of step with most modern liberal democracies. So Poland itself has, in the eyes of some, become something of a dog whistle nation. If someone admires Poland or likes Poland or talks a lot about Poland or has a Poland ball for an avatar or something, people are going to make all kinds of assumptions about them. Obviously you can't do anything about that, but I think it's a little bit unfair to say the least. And come on, at least Poland isn't Hungary. Religion plays a much bigger role in the game, given its time period and so on, than it does in most other fantasy games, where picking your god from a pantheon is a bit like going shopping. You know, you just pick a god off the shelf. Which one's right for me? Oh, this god has more fibre. I worship Crom because he keeps me regular. Crom flakes. Yeah, so that I find, personally, I'm a rather militant atheist, and yet I find religion and its role in society and magic and mysticism, I find all that fascinating. And I enjoy sometimes playing religious characters, but you know, the religious aspect has to mean something. It's fun to me to step into a completely different and alien mindset to my own and play that character in that way. I think it helps people understand each other, not to be too grandiose and too J. Scott Garibay saying what's wonderful about games. I do think games are wonderful, I just don't take it that far. But I think you can train your compassion and your empathy by playing something that's not you. And that's why I hate this trend for self-inserts in gaming. But yeah, this is a setting where religion is important, where gender roles are quite strict, because this is a historical setting. An actual historical setting, not a BBC historical setting where everything gets changed. Right? So everything is done in that character. And it all makes sense, and it's all interesting, and it's all historical. But yeah, as we said earlier, you know, medieval authentic doesn't mean you have to have spent 4 years in university reading on Poland before you can play the game. There are some intricacies added to the rules, which, this being OSR, which is innately sort of DIY, pick and choose what you want. You don't have to use or not use any of them, but said intricacies include some of the common sort of special attack types, critical hit tables, parrying rules, suitable loot tables for the setting, suitable monsters for the setting based on Eastern European and Slavic mythology, some of which will be familiar to you from The Witcher in its various forms. And you've got a pretty good primer on the history, politics and geography of Poland in this period without going too far overboard. And there's plenty of tables for encounters, random events, random artifacts, etc. So if you're someone who plays games single player, which I'm more aware of than I used to be, then the basis is again pretty much all there for you to work from, should you decide that you want to. Domain rules are present if you want your character to settle down and start a homestead, or if you're rewarded with some land for for your various adventures and so on. The domain rules present are a trifle scant, but this being OSR, you can easily import other OSR rules, or even plug in domain rules from something like Pendragon or something. That would work fine. So anywhere there's something kind of missing, you can probably find a cheap PDF on DriveThru that'll save you the work of doing it yourself. Alright then, so what do we think overall? Well, it is a nice book. I believe this is the DriveThru printing. Yeah, Ingram Content Group, which is Lightning Source. Generally speaking, I do not like the quality of Lightning Source's prints. It doesn't look so bad here because the style of the historical art is somewhat flat in any case. So the print process, which tends to dull a lot of things through Lightning Source, it doesn't have such a major effect here. Having it on a parchment background helps as well. I don't like the font. It looks like Times New Roman to me. Maybe it isn't, but something a little more in keeping, like even just Georgia or something, would have made it a bit more readable and a bit less. This is a Word document to me. I mean, the heading stuff strikes the right balance between readable and ornate, so that's fine. It's just the main body text to me is a little off. Some of my viewers are getting a bit older now. The point size of the text is slightly bigger, which does bloat the book, but it does make it more readable, especially against the parchment background. One slightly stronger criticism I would have is never underline things. It makes things less readable and just looks kind of crummy. You'll also note that on some of the pages towards the front and the back, the bleed isn't all the way across the page. I don't know whose fault that is, because it works on this side of the page. Either something's misaligned, or I've been given an early proof copy where this was missed, or it could be a one-off, so I can't speak to the quality of the print overall. But the hardback binding is nice and feels fairly solid. Still, I would never use DriveThru's print service anymore. I stick with Lulu. It's different Lulu printers in different countries, but so far their quality, even on their low quality colour prints, is better to me. I could probably make more money if I put hard copies for sale through DriveThru, but as has been long and well established, I'm a terrible businessman. Yeah, so there you go. So presentation wise then, I mean, I like the art they've chosen, the historical art. I think the AI art does mostly blend in. For some people that's going to be a deal breaker. For me, it isn't. The tables are a bit plain for me. The font choices, and the underlining, The writing style is a little dry, but then it's a historical setting, so you kind of expect that, and maybe I'm a bit more used to it because I actually studied history, but pre-Christian Britain was more my speciality and area of interest. So I can't necessarily speak to the accuracy or lack thereof, but as a gamer, everything is here that you need. It's a little dry, but it's all there. This is a complete game. You don't really need anything else to go with it, and there should be enough here to get you going. So, right, style then. A high 3 bordering on a 4 for style. The AI art sometimes is a little bit jarring. Some of the layout choices and so on are what make me bring it down for style, and as I say, it's a little bit dry. If those things don't bother you at all, you can probably bump that up to a 4, because it's right on that dividing line. In terms of substance, I can't really fault it, though I would have liked phonetic pronunciations of the various Polish words and terms throughout the book, or a guide on how you pronounce Polish, because it has to be the most bloody-minded and difficult language since Welsh, quite frankly, with all kinds of extraneous consonants that frankly I could do without. So so there's that. But a mid to high 4 for content, I think, and it's mostly the style side, the presentation, that brings down that content score slightly. So high 3 for style, a mid to high 4 for substance, 7 out of 10, 3.5 out of 5. Brief reminder, I use the full gamut of scores, so I genuinely give a 1 to 5 score in each category and then combine it together. So average is 3, pretty much, right? So anything above 3 is good. So 3.5 is good, but this is a specialist interest. If you're interested in medieval gaming, authentic historical settings, and the OSR, this is going to be your bag, right? If you're not, it's not. And as I say, those various things may have brought down the scores a little bit, but if you don't agree, you can probably bump it up to a 4 out of 5, which would make it, you know, a more definite buy if you're into this sort of thing. What tips would I give? Which I've forgotten to do on a couple of recent reviews. Change the font, work a little more on the presentation, double check the bleed, more complete domain rules, and maybe a fully dedicated like ritual magician class or something that you could probably nick that from other appropriate OSR type games or Pundit's other medieval authentic work. Zang.
And $10 for the last 5 years, you hard-nosed Polak son of a bitch.
Please mind the gap between the train and the platform.
Neverware is a book by Neil Gaiman and a TV series from 1996, which has also been produced as a radio play and as a graphic novel. I secured permission in 1997 from Crucial Films and Neil Gaiman's agent to produce a semi-official Neverware role-playing game, provided that it not be done for profit. With the Neverware RPG, you can follow in the footsteps of the Lady Door and Richard Mayhew Dick in exploring London's mysterious underside, the twilight world just out of sight of normal people. Beware of Knight's Bridge, avoid the Seven Sisters, be cautious of Turnham Green, and walk the byways of the floating market. Neverware uses the description system, a bridge between descriptive prose and dice mechanics, to let you really bring your words to life. Available for free at drivethrurpg.com.
The priest he says we're wicked, for to worship the devil's bird. But we respect the old ways, and we disregard his word. For we know they rest uneasy as we slumber in the night, and we'll always leave out a little bit of meat for the bird that's black and white. One's for sorrow, two's for joy.